Breaking: Keir Starmer just delivered his most radical education overhaul in decades. And what happened next has sent shockwaves through Britain's political establishment. The Prime Minister has completely destroyed Tony Blair's iconic university target. Nigel Farage is calling his policies racist. And a massive youth revolution is brewing that could reshape Britain's future forever. This isn't just education reform anymore. This is a government desperately fighting for its political survival. If you want to stay ahead of stories like this that reshape the world, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to see will change how you think about British politics forever. Here's what sparked the biggest education revolution in British history. 3 days ago, Keir Starmer went nuclear on Tony Blair's legacy. His message was crystal clear. The old target of sending 50% of young people to university is dead. We're replacing it with something completely different. But Starmer wasn't just talking about education reform. He exposed something that has British families absolutely furious. Government documents show that while universities struggle with funding cuts, Starmer's administration is spending billions on luxury accommodations for illegal migrants in 4-star hotels. We're talking about premium services with full catering and healthcare. Meanwhile, young British students are drowning in debt and can't afford basic education. The moral contrast is so stark, so outrageous, that even Labour's own education experts are refusing to defend it.
Argument and debate based on facts acknowledged by both sides. I think extreme language should be avoided, and calling Nigel Farage a racist, and by you can follow the logic that really implies that the supporters are racist, because if it's racist politics, I think that's a huge mistake. Both pragmatically, it's not going to persuade people to vote Labour and not vote Reform. It's going to motivate and solidify those people who were going to vote Reform anyway, and those people who might be considering voting Reform. It's not a rational argument. It's name-calling like you get in school playgrounds.
And if you think this story is shocking so far, just wait, because it gets so much worse. Starmer's response was swift and devastating. In his Labour Party conference speech, watched by millions, he declared that the old way of measuring educational success through university attendance is finished. No foreign education model has the right to dictate Britain's future, and no leader should fund luxury for illegal migrants while British students struggle with crushing debt. His exact words were chilling. Britain has forgotten what it means to invest in its own young people. While American companies face crushing regulations, British students are abandoned like second-class citizens in their own country. This changes now. Within hours, the political earthquake began. Education unions started emergency meetings about opposing the reforms. The Conservative opposition quietly celebrated the destruction of Blair's legacy. British education stocks fluctuated wildly. Billions of pounds in university funding suddenly became uncertain. But then something unprecedented happened that nobody saw coming. Nigel Farage shattered all political conventions with a response that left Britain's establishment absolutely stunned. At a Reform UK rally, Farage delivered what political watchers are calling the most brutal takedown of Starmer's leadership. The government's education policies, Farage declared with unmistakable fury, are fundamentally racist against British families. Racist against British families. The room erupted in thunderous applause. The accusation of racism wasn't accidental. It was a direct, devastating shot at Starmer's moral authority, delivered with the full weight of political rebellion. For the first time in modern history, Britain's leading opposition figure appeared to completely destroy the Prime Minister's credibility on live television.
When was the last time that you heard Nigel Farage say anything positive about Britain's future? He can't. He doesn't like Britain, doesn't believe in Britain, wants you to doubt it just as much as he does. So he resorts to grievance. They all do. They want to turn this country, this proud, self-reliant country, into a competition of victims, saying to you, to working people, don't trust in each other. You can't fix this. This is not a great country. So let's fly all our flags conference because they're our flags. They belong to all of us, and we will never surrender them.
Political insiders reveal that Farage has been quietly building a coalition of parents, students, and education workers who feel betrayed by Labour's policies. The Reform UK leader literally stepping in where the government failed, using his platform to voice the concerns Starmer ignored. The optics are absolutely devastating for Starmer, an opposition leader speaking for ordinary families, while the elected Prime Minister abandons traditional British values. It's a political comparison so brutal that no amount of government spin can overcome it. But the confrontation escalated even further. In an extraordinary live response to Starmer's conference speech, Farage delivered an unprecedented rebuke. He accused the Prime Minister of descending into the gutter, warning that calling reform supporters racist could incite violence from radical left groups like Antifa. Farage invoked recent political violence and declared Starmer unfit to be Prime Minister. His promise was chilling. Reform will teach Starmer a lesson in the May elections that British political history will never forget. Social media exploded with the hashtag #StudentsFirst trending globally for 4 straight days. Over 1.8 million posts, 37 million engagements, and viral videos contrasting migrant hotel luxury with struggling British students shared across every platform. These aren't just random social media posts, they're professionally edited videos showing the stark contrast between government priorities. Luxury accommodations for illegal arrivals alongside British families struggling to pay education costs. The visual narrative is so morally devastating that even mainstream news networks are being forced to cover it. Even Labour's own MPs are breaking ranks. Graham Stringer, a respected Labour MP, strongly criticized Starmer's rhetoric, arguing it's counterproductive name-calling that won't persuade voters but will instead solidify reform supporters. He emphasized that politics should be based on rational debate and facts, not extreme language that resembles school playground behavior. The controversy deepened when Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy made extraordinary comments about Farage allegedly flirting with Hitler Youth in his younger years. The segment included actual audio from Lammy's initial comments on BBC Politics Live and his later clarification, demonstrating the risks of escalating political rhetoric and how quickly politicians can overreach when using strong language against opponents.
His remarks and said, actually, I accept that Reform UK have denied this and I want to play the policy, play the ball, not the man. So it was quite a sort of swift turnaround from that. I think that just is kind of symptomatic of where there is a bit of a risk here.
And clarified its political speak for saying the opposite of what you said a couple of hours previously.
Well, newscasters can hear for themselves how this entire story arc played out, because here is David Lammy version 1 at lunchtime on BBC Two.
So yes or no, is Nigel Farage a racist?
I answered your question. I'm not going to play the man. I'm playing the ball as our leader did. I will leave it for the public to come to their own judgments about someone who once flirted with Hitler Youth when he was younger. That is for the public, but we will be absolutely clear about the policy choice before the British people in the years ahead as we head to the general election.
And then here is David Lammy version 2 with Alex a couple of hours later.
I think there were some articles circling around from a teacher, but I wasn't at school with Nigel Farage. I don't know what songs he sang at school, so I'm happy.
You have no evidence for that suggestion.
I'm happy to clarify. I did say it's for the public to make up their mind, and I did also emphasise that let us play the ball, not the man. So it's not my intention to play the man, Nigel Farage. In fact, I did a show with Nigel Farage on LBC a few years ago. Let us concentrate on the ball, the policy which is the deportation policy, his policies on the NHS, which I think is to charge, and his policies on lowering tax cuts, which would lead to the bond markets, not the man.
To be totally clear, you're pulling back from that comment that you made.
He has denied it. And so I accept that he has denied it, and I would like to clarify that position because in the end the Prime Minister was keen for us to focus on the policies, not the individual.
Let's talk about one.
So an example there of like when you up the ante on whether things are racist.
The streets tell the real story. Massive protests have erupted across London, Birmingham, Manchester, and Liverpool. These aren't fringe demonstrations. These are ordinary families, students, teachers, and working-class citizens demanding answers. Their chant echoes through Parliament Square. British students first, not migrants in hotels. Police have increased security around Westminster as crowds grow larger each day. British students carrying signs asking why illegal migrants get luxury treatment while they face crushing debt and reduced opportunities.
Now, Sir Keir Starmer has blamed the ongoing migrant crisis on Brexit and Reform UK leaders Nigel Farage.
Yes, in an interview with GB News' political editor Christopher Hope yesterday, the Prime Minister branded the small boats crossing the Channel as Farage boats. Let's take a listen.
The returns agreement with France is important because we need to establish that if you come by boat, you will be returned to France. I accept the numbers are low. We had to prove the concept and prove that it could work. We've now done that, but now we need to ramp that up. I would gently point out to Nigel Farage and others that before we left the EU, we had a returns agreement with every country in the EU. And he told the country, make no difference if we left. But he was wrong about that. These are Farage boats in many senses that are coming across the Channel.
The political earthquake inside Westminster is accelerating. Cabinet meetings have devolved into heated arguments with ministers openly questioning Starmer's judgment. 5 junior ministers have privately warned the Prime Minister that his policies are becoming politically toxic. Senior Labour MPs are signing letters demanding urgent review of education funding, terrified of losing their seats. Over 60 backbench MPs have now publicly distanced themselves from the university reform policy. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage and Reform UK are capitalizing on the chaos. Their British Students First campaign has surged 12 points in the polls in just 2 weeks, with young voters abandoning Labour in record numbers. The international fallout is equally catastrophic. European education ministers have expressed concerns about Britain's radical policy shifts. Even Commonwealth countries are privately questioning whether Britain is abandoning its educational heritage under Starmer. From Washington to Canberra, headlines are savage. Britain abandons its students. Education under siege in London. The breaking point came during Prime Minister's questions when Conservative MP Sarah Mitchell held up a photograph of struggling British students. The House of Commons fell silent as Mitchell demanded, "Can the Prime Minister explain why funding luxury hotels for illegal migrants is more important than supporting British students pursuing higher education?" The photograph showed students working multiple jobs to pay for university, their textbooks worn and secondhand, a stark contrast to the luxury accommodations provided to illegal arrivals. Starmer stumbled through his response, visibly shaken and constantly referring to pre-written notes, while MPs hammered him with moral outrage. For several agonizing minutes, the Prime Minister looked like a man who had completely lost control of his own narrative. The economic damage is mounting daily. International education investors are pulling money from British universities. Major educational institutions are relocating partnerships to Ireland, Germany, and Canada to avoid Britain's uncertain policy environment. Oxford and Cambridge announced they're reviewing their international programs. The London School of Economics is transferring key research operations to European partners. Treasury officials privately admit the education upheaval could cost Britain hundreds of billions in lost intellectual capital and international prestige. The post-Brexit educational recovery that Starmer promised is crumbling before his eyes. But the deeper crisis is moral legitimacy. When your own education system questions your judgment, when opposition leaders call your policies racist, when students struggle while illegal migrants live in luxury, you're not facing standard political opposition. You're facing a complete legitimacy crisis that no government advisor can fix. The visual narrative dominating every screen in Britain tells an undeniable story. Government-funded luxury suites versus student debt. Migrant hotel services versus university funding cuts. Starmer's remaining defenders talk about complexity and competing priorities. But no one cares about bureaucratic excuses when British students who represent the nation's future are literally being priced out of education, while illegal arrivals receive premium treatment. Every day brings fresh revelations, more leaked documents showing ballooning hotel costs, more heartbreaking student stories, more viral social media content fueling unprecedented public rage. The algorithms on every platform are amplifying this content because the engagement rates are through the roof. The emotional power is so intense that the content spreads faster than any government response can contain it. This isn't just an education scandal anymore, it's become the defining symbol of everything wrong with Starmer's leadership. Detached from reality, morally tone-deaf, willing to abandon British students while funding luxury for those who entered illegally. Social media groups like Students Before Migrants have gained over 400,000 members in just 10 days. They're organizing boycotts, fundraising for struggling students, and creating viral content that reaches millions daily. Inside number 10 Downing Street, sources describe an atmosphere of complete panic and despair. Ministers who once stood loyally beside Starmer are now quietly plotting their escape routes. Labour Party officials are privately discussing whether Starmer can survive until the next election, with some suggesting he should consider stepping down for the good of the party. The question is no longer whether Starmer can survive this scandal. Political analysts agree that his moral authority is effectively finished. The only question now is whether his government can last another month without completely falling apart. Britain is watching a prime minister self-destruct in real time. This crisis will be studied for decades as a textbook example of moral leadership failure. The political earthquake is just getting started, and the aftershocks will reshape British politics for years to come. At its epicenter stands a man who looks increasingly isolated, increasingly desperate, and increasingly finished. Farage's accusation wasn't just about education or immigration policy, it was about moral clarity and leadership. And on that measure, Starmer has failed so completely that his own party members are distancing themselves from him. That's not just political defeat. That's historical humiliation that will define his legacy forever. What do you think? Has Starmer crossed a line that British voters will never forgive? Is this the end of his political career? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story shocked you as much as it shocked us, share it with everyone who needs to see what's really happening in British politics right now. The mainstream media won't tell you the full truth, but we will.